person beside you.
Good evening. My name is Theodis Pace. I'm the president of Kankakee County branch of the NAACP. This evening we have the opportunity to listen to the automatic candidates in the 3rd and 4th Ward in the city of Kankakee, who are on the April 6th ballot to hear their views about their respective platforms. This evening will be viewed by audience from a variety of places, and we'll have the opportunity to ask questions as well. We want to thank Mr. Steve Bertrand and his staff of the Kankakee Public Library for again having this venue as a place that we can host our forum. Before we begin tonight, I'd like to remind everyone to turn off all personal electronic devices. This event was organized by the Kankakee County Branch Political Action Committee. The purpose of this forum is to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government. The NAACP is a nonpartisan, volunteer-driven organization. This evening, we'd like to thank Alderman Larry Osinga from the 3rd Ward, Ms. Don Tutt, 4th Ward, Mr. Frank Hassett, the 3rd of the 4th Ward, and Mr. Benjamin Clark, who will be running as a volunteer in the 3rd Ward. In the interest of time, I'd like to ask all individuals to hold their applause to the end of this event. Bear in mind that we may not have time for all of the questions that might be being asked by the public. Our timer for the evening is the Secretary of the NAACP, Kankakee County, is Ms. Paulette Crank. Each candidate would have a 3-minute opening and closing statement, and they have 1 minute to ask questions from the panel. Our panel this evening is Ms. Perales, a member of our Kankakee Branch Political Action Committee, Mr. James Taylor from the City News, and Mr. Lee Provost from the Daily Journal. The format, again, 3 minutes, opening, closing, 1 minute to ask the respective question. And we're going to start this evening with Marta Perales asking a question. With the opening statement with Mr. Osinga, followed by Ms. Tutt. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'd like to thank everybody for coming out tonight. I would like to begin by thanking the NAACP and the Kankakee Public Library for hosting this forum. My name is Larry Osinga, and I am currently the Alderman in the 3rd Ward. I've been the Alderman for the past 12 years, and I have resided in the 3rd Ward for the past 42 years. I was first elected Alderman in 2009, immediately after I retired from the police department. Then I was re-elected in 2013, re-elected in 2017, and I am once again seeking re-election as the 3rd Ward Alderman. I've been married to my lovely wife, Connie, for the past 38 years. We have 4 children and 11 grandchildren. I'm a graduate of Governor State University, and I also attended the Northwestern University Police School of Staff and Command. Prior to becoming an alderman, I began my career as a police officer in the city of Kankakee in 1980. I was honored to work for the Kankakee Police Department for 30 years. During my career, I was promoted to sergeant, then I was promoted to lieutenant, and my last 9 years with the department, I was promoted to bureau commander. I was responsible for the daily activity of the detective bureau, the stolen auto, and the juvenile division of the Kankakee Police Department. I've had many challenges in my career. I developed and implemented the Citizens Police Academy many years ago, where during my tenure we had over 300 people graduate from the Citizens Police Academy. I was also the director of a unit known as the Violent Crime Task Force, where our unit reinvestigated old, unsolved homicides that probably would have never been looked at again because of the workload of the Detective Bureau. We were successful in reinvestigating and solving 12 older homicides. I also had the misfortune of being shot in the line of duty in 1989 while trying to arrest a murder suspect. I could have retired from the police department at age 37 after that shooting incident. but I healed up and returned to work. This was not a job for me, it was a career, and I was honored to serve the citizens of Kankakee. I am currently president of the Kankakee County Crime Stoppers Board. I am also president of the 100 Club of Kankakee County. The 100 Club consists of approximately 500 members that provide financial assistance to families of police and firemen who were injured or killed in the line of duty. I feel I have the energy, the knowledge, and experience to continue to serve the constituents of the 3rd Ward. I would ask for you to continue voting for me as the 3rd Ward Alderman. Thank you.
Ms. Tutt.
Good evening. First, I'd like to thank Mr. Pace and the members of the NAACP for this candidate forum, which is an important event in our democratic process. Thank you also to the panelists, timer, and all the individuals who have had a hand in making this possible. Thank you also to the Public Library for providing this venue for us to gather, and to my opponent, Frank, for coming along and participating this evening as well. I've been a resident of Kankakee for 47 years, 30 of those at my current residence in the 4th Ward. Currently, I am the founder and director of 3D Wildlife Rescue and Rehabilitation, Kankakee's only nonprofit licensed wildlife rehabilitation center. At 3D, I have worked for 15 years to rehabilitate sick, injured, and orphaned wildlife in the Kankakee area and contribute to the local ecological health of our natural ecosystem. As a community leader in wildlife interpretation, I have served as a charter member of the Kankakee County Animal Welfare Advisory Committee, a subcommittee of the Kankakee County Board. I've been involved in several community charities, including those that advocate for the LGBTQ issues, the American Red Cross is a member of the Emergency Disaster Team, and to local school youth programs, and as well as domestic shelters. I've worked to educate and advocate on women's issues as I've served as a curriculum coordinator and instructor at KCC and the JTPA programs designed to enhance employment opportunities for women. As your 4th Ward Alderman, I will be advocating for issues that not only impact the 4th Ward, but the entire city of Kankakee. Some of the things I'll be fighting for: work to develop business opportunities citywide, creating safer streets and overall public safety. I will work to give our law enforcement the tools and resources they need to protect our community, ensuring that taxes are handled ethically and responsibly, and that they benefit the entire community. I will continue to support the inclusion of the disabled and the elderly in and around the city. I will foster relationships between minority communities and the city government and advocate for issues that are important to the future of black, brown, white, red, yellow, all young people to move forward. I'll work towards ensuring that all city services are accessible to all communities and backgrounds, and I will advocate for the homeless and underserved by supporting and enhancing community programs that provide life-saving support and resources. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hassett, before you begin, and Ms. Tutt, I'm asking the panel and also the candidates, please speak into the mic, and I want to apologize. Ms. Tutt, Mr. Hassett, both of you, I need to give you masks. You need to exchange masks.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. Am I ready?
Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Frank Kasich, and I am running for the City of Kankakee's 4th Ward Alderman. I'd like to thank the NAACP for allowing me an opportunity tonight to tell the community why I should be the next 4th Ward Alderman. I've spent my entire life living in the City of Kankakee's southwest side, and the last several years preparing myself for this election process. I've attended numerous City Council meetings in person. I've spent countless hours driving our ward thinking of ways to improve it. I've also spent hours discussing issues with residents, and I've been active in our community as a volunteer firefighter for the last 15 years, 6 of those serving as the fire chief. I also participated the last 10 years as the education director for our county's fire academy, graduating over 180 candidates to protect and serve this community. This is more than just a position to me. This is something I truly believe I was destined to do. I've always been the first to help when there is a need, and the City of Kankakee is in dire need of help. I believe with my leadership skills I've obtained over an extensive career in the fire service and running a small business, I can lead the city's 4th Ward and ultimately the city as a whole towards a path of success. My goals are simple. Public safety will always be my top priority during my tenure as Alderman. Since I currently serve as a fire chief and I have previously served as a nationally certified search and rescue canine handler with my bloodhound partner, Red. With my experience as a public safety member both on the fire and police side, I can offer things to the community that many aldermen and women can't, and that is firsthand knowledge and experience of the city's top issue. Secondly, the city's Code and Building Department is in dire need of leadership and a new direction. Our city would look so much more beautiful if the codes were just simply enforced. The lack of resources over the last decade that have not been allocated to our high-rent blighted areas is a complete slap in the face to those who actually take care of their properties in those areas. There is no reason why the city's centralized wards should look any different than the west and south side wards, given the ordinance of the entire city. We need to enforce codes regardless of the area and hold everyone accountable to the same standard. Third is the city's fiscal responsibility. I know it's a broken record at this point, but the amount of money spent on legal services is completely outrageous, and that is only one example of mismanagement of funds over the last couple decades. This can simply save us hundreds and thousands of dollars by switching back to our very knowledgeable municipal attorneys for a quarter of the cost that live and spend money in our area. I fully intend to dissect each and every single bill before I ever vote to approve the bills, ensuring your tax dollars are spent accordingly and responsibly without waste. Fourth, my communication skills are second to none. I'm on every social media platform answering questions and providing information about the city on a regular basis. My favorite form of communication is face-to-face. I fully intend to take a ride every single weekend through our wards, streets, and alleys that only take approximately 1 hour. I can use this opportunity to become more personable with every resident in the city's 4th Ward to ensure that I am present and I am informed on what's going on in our ward. Your phone call, email, Facebook message, text message will never go unanswered, and you will be heard regardless of political party. I am here to serve. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Thank you to the Kankakee County branch of the NAACP and the Kankakee Public Library for hosting this candidate forum. Thank you to our panel for being here and asking us questions. Thank you to those here and viewing from home for attending. This is truly democracy in action. I'm Ben Clark, and I'm running for Kankakee's 3rd Ward Alderman. I graduated in 2014 from Trine University with a degree in accounting and finance and a minor in economics. Currently, I work for the Kankakee School District at the high school and junior high as an accountant. I've been a member of the Kankakee Firefighters Pension Board for the last year. People say that Kankakee cannot be the great city it once was. I disagree wholeheartedly. Kankakee has the resources to be the hub of activity in Kankakee County. We have the resources to have a unique downtown. We have the resources to have a unique riverfront. We have the resources to bring Kankakee into the future. This evening, you will hear my plans to bring Kankakee and the 3rd Ward into the future on issues such as public safety, economic development, and communication. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to have the questions starting with you, Ms. Tutt, and the questions come from Ms. Perales.
Good morning, or good afternoon, good evening. My question thank you for being here. My question is, housing issues affects Black and brown communities differently than white communities. Considering some of our historical challenges when it comes to equity, do you have any suggestions as to how you can help Black and brown communities with some of the housing issues locally?
Inclusion. I would hope that the Black and brown community would start becoming a little more involved at our city council meetings, our community meetings. The ECDA, and there are other grant programs that I hope to look and investigate into in getting better housing situations in our Black and brown communities. There are programs where we can get private sector dollars, investors to come in and provide better housing stock in some of those particular neighborhoods and areas of concern.
Mr. Hassett.
Can you repeat the question, please? I believe it almost sounded like there was 2 different things. You said something about Black and brown communities and then issues involving housing. Is that summing up the
I will
issue?
repeat it.
Okay.
Housing issues affect Black and brown communities differently than white communities. Considering some of our historical challenges when it comes to equity, Do you have any suggestions to help some of the housing issues in Black and brown communities?
I think people overall are just uneducated possibly on how to buy a house to begin with. So we can benefit by reaching out to the community with information on classes they can attend here locally on, first of all, how the home buyer process goes, what they need to look for as far as credit score, down payment. The city offers a down payment assistance program, I believe they allocate money to every single year. So, those are things that anyone can take advantage of, but specifically correlating to Black and brown communities, they may possibly just not be educated on the process. So the first part is to educate them on the process and then go from there. So I would hold education classes for that.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you for this question. As Ms. Tutt said, it comes down to inclusion and working with them to understand the home buying process, especially with the city's down payment assistance program. The city currently has a down payment assistance program along with some entities in the city to help them buy homes. And there's also a bank in the city of Kankakee that is in the 3rd Ward that has a down payment assistance program. We need to get those people in touch with those institutions so that they can use them, and it will help educate them on the home buying process. It will give them the resources to help them buy a home. And then also we need to work with our young folks in the school district so that they can understand at a young age, to understand the process to buy a home and to put them on the right path to buying a home.
Thank you. Mr. Osinga.
Thank you. We have a very good community development in our city. We do have a home buyers program where people can get $2,500 of down payment money to help them find a home. We work very hard to get people to purchase homes in the city of Kankakee. Midland Bank is part of the program. They provide money for people to get money for their down payment program. And I think if you drive around the city, I don't think there is any area of the city that is any more diverse than any other parts of the city. I mean, we have a very diverse community, and it's spread out entirely throughout our community. Thank you.
Mr. Hassel, you have the next question. The question is coming from Mr. Taylor.
Excuse me. They say that the past is a good indicator of the future. What past experiences have you had that would make you the person to be the alderman?
Past experience, I've run a small business before, so I have the unique opportunity to understand how the city manages their funds, how it impacts a small business, just like raising sales tax. I wasn't particularly for that sales tax raise because it kind of excludes some of those people who might want to come in with those types of small businesses. But my experience in small business at the Dairy Queen on the east side of Kankakee, I think propels me into that position knowing that it impacts those small business communities.
Mr. Clark.
Thank you for that question. Working at the school district, especially as an accountant, I've worked with government funds and understand how to spend tax dollars appropriately. I've worked with budgets. I won't be saying that budgets are complex, and after having done them for a few years, and I know how to appropriate funds correctly and manage them correctly.
Mr. Osinga.
Thank you. I have personally owned a company called Landmark Garages. I oversaw that company for over 20 years. We were in the construction business doing all types of construction. I'm also a property owner. I have several rental properties in the city of Kankakee. I also sit on the budget committee and watch very closely how the money is spent in the city. We have a budget committee, and before we make any major decisions on what we might purchase, it's got to go before the budget committee, and then it comes before city council, and it's got to be passed by city council before any expenditures over $20,000 can be made. And that's why we had a little bit of an issue with the fire truck. There was an issue, somebody wanted to buy a fire truck for $570,000, and we had no bidding process. So it got voted down by city council, It was sent out for bids, and we just recently purchased a fire truck. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Tubb, before you ask the question, can everyone actually try to make every effort to speak into the mic? I just got a text that some individuals can hear you. Okay? Ms. Tubb, you have the question. Thank you.
I also have owned small businesses within my lifetime here in the city of Kankakee and know how to hire, train, and get the most for each dollar that we have coming in for materials, workforce, insurances, et cetera. Running a nonprofit organization adds even another unique piece to that, and that we know how to make every penny count, from what's coming in to how to find sources of revenue to bring in to make it work. Additionally, being in both of those occupations and in the nonprofit status, I work well with volunteers, how to drum up and bring volunteers together to work together on projects that could be done throughout the ward and throughout the city. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Provost, you have the question to Mr. Clark.
Okay. Thank you. What do you consider the greatest asset of your ward, and how can that asset be put to greater use?
The greatest asset of the third ward currently is the fact that we are a primarily residential ward. So we have housing, and nice housing, in the third ward that will attract people, especially the fastest growing demographic to buy houses currently in the United States is millennials. And millennials want a nice area to move to. And that is attractive that we have in the third ward. What we need is a nice downtown and a nice riverfront, because those people want those kind of amenities.
Go ahead, Mr. Clark. You can finish.
That's it.
Thank you. So based on the first three questions, we have accounting and we have business owners in our respective city. So how would you, as a council member, propose providing new revenue, Mr. Osinga, for the city in order to accomplish improvement necessary to better our city and improve the quality of life?
Theodis, the other three never got to answer that question.
Oh, did I? Oh, I jumped way ahead of economic development here. Thank you, Ms. Crane. Good. Mr. Osinga, I'm sorry.
Could
You got
please
the question
repeat
from
question?
Mr.
You got me
Provost.
confused now.
Yeah,
I will repeat it.
thank
What do you consider the greatest asset of your ward, and how can that asset be put to greater use?
I think one of our greatest assets in the third ward are the people that reside in the third ward. We have community meetings periodically, 3 or 4 times a year, and we have 30 to 50 people show up at the meetings anytime we have a meeting. Some time ago, when the Park District was financially strapped and couldn't move forward, at one of our meetings, I asked for volunteers to work in the Park District and help them clean up some of the parks. And I had an unbelievable results. People came out. We had like 20 people come out, and we worked for 6 or 7 hours in one of the parks and cleaned up the area. And I couldn't have been more proud of the people in the third ward. They're always willing to step up and do what's asked of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Todd?
We have very unique assets with us within the fourth ward. In addition to the people of the fourth ward, we have a great amount of land, potential for industry and commercial development. We will be seeing some changes coming forward, as what I'm understanding now. I would like to see that continue. Where you're exiting off at 308 and coming into that south side, we need to keep growing and moving and developing, bringing businesses and industries into that area, and continue with the businesses that we have in the smaller sections of the fourth ward.
Okay. Mr. Hassett?
I'll echo some of what Ms. Tutt said. We do have a huge expansion area down by the 308 for industry and economic development. Another thing is the parks that are in the fourth ward, McBroom Park, the walking paths, We are primary residential, so we do have that benefit of a lot of home ownership and a lot of pride in ownership in the individual's properties. So I would say those are definitely benefits in our area.
Thank you. So now I get a chance to do that follow-up question. How would you, as the council member, propose providing new revenues for the city in order to accomplish improvement necessary to better our city and improve the quality of life? Mr. Osinga.
Thank you. Every community is always looking for businesses and business opportunities. There are 2 trade shows in the United States every year. There's one in Chicago and there's one in Las Vegas. We need to go there. We used to do that. We need to go back to doing this. We need to go there. We need to showcase our community and what we have to offer for the businesses. We have the rail service here in Kankakee. We're close to I-57. We're only 60 miles south of Chicago, and we have the Karma plant. That's a wonderful plant. Businesses also are looking at schools, housing, and crime stats and infrastructure before they move to a community. They just don't throw a dart at the wall and decide we're going to start a business there. When I was on vacation in Florida a couple of years ago, I ran across a restaurant called Five Guys. I thought it was phenomenal. I reached out to their CEO after I came back and invited them to come to our community. Thank you.
Ms. Tutt.
There are multiple ways to bring new revenue into the community through grant programs, but again, enticing and bringing businesses in. We can offer some tax TIF programs as long as those TIF programs do not impact negatively the residents that actually live here. Like Mr. Osinga said, we do. We have infrastructure possibilities. We have transportation possibilities. We are at a prime location, 60 miles south of Chicago. We're also not that far from the Champaign-Urbana area that continues to grow as well. So we need to invest in and study and bring businesses in, both large and small businesses, to our downtown and full locations. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hassett.
We need to show progress in some public safety first. Those two kind of coincide hand in hand. You have to work on public safety and economic development at the exact same time. There are grants available that are out there, but a lot of those are drying up. I really think we should have a better tax abatement program for new business coming in, abate their taxes for a certain period of time. I believe we do that a little bit now, but it may give some incentive for new business to come in. I do believe, and I said this a while ago, we need to get a PR service to come in and make a general overview of the city and all the things that we have that would benefit potential businesses coming in. So let's say the mayor and council members go out to a new business or someone looking to start a business. We can provide them with a video of services that we have and infrastructure that we already have in our city. And we need to get some input from successful areas like New Lenox, Frankfort, Orland, Downer Grove, and see what they've done on their path to success as a small community to a big community.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
We're sitting in the area that is best suited to attract economic development. We are in our downtown. There are currently 13 vacant buildings in our downtown when I drove through the other day. That is an absolute gold mine that the city of Kankakee is sitting on. We are also have the Kankakee River that runs right through our community. That is a gold mine that we are sitting on that we need to take advantage of. Those are the two things that will help us grow economically, but it will also allow show people that we are a place to live. As I said, millennials are the fastest growing demographic buying homes in the country. That is the group that we need to be targeting to buy homes, and they are looking for amenities such as a nice downtown, a nice riverfront, places to spend their time at.
Thank you. Ms. Morales, you have the question to Ms. Tutt.
Yes, this came from an audience member. The Fortitude Homeless Services nonprofit was recently denied a permit to use an existing site as an emergency homeless shelter. Would you have voted differently regarding this permit? how do you believe the city should interact with the homeless population?
Yes, I would have voted differently. I thought a conditional use permit on a trial basis would have been a fair step. I have met with Dr. Bowers. I have been to the shelter. I'm starting to meet some of the guests that have actually been there. The location of the shelter, it is important for those that utilize that shelter to be able to access all of the services, medical, educational, library, job study, mental health. So locating the shelter needs to be in a place where individuals can access it, transportation. And I would have agreed that for the conditional use as a trial would have been very appropriate.
Thank you. Mr. Hassett?
I was 100% for the amended version that Alderman Fafford brought forth. I believe Fortitude even said they're not looking for a permanent place in St. Paul's. But my question is why is it always last minute? It always seems to be last minute with the city council right before it starts getting cold out. And why is it specifically only a city of Kankakee problem? You know, I think that's something we need to work on with the county as a whole to try to figure out the homeless issue, because I believe Bradley Bourbonis have ordinances or rules against homelessness, and we don't necessarily have that, but I do believe we need to work with the county, and it needs to be addressed a lot earlier. At the end of the day, you represent your constituents, and if your constituents are for or against it, you are their voice in the city council.
Mr. Clark?
So I am fully in support of a shelter for Fortitude. I met with Fortitude and Dr. Burrs, and then the next day at church at the class that I attend, we talked about social justice and taking care of those less fortunate than us. And to me, that was a sign that this is something that is definitely needed. We need to work to help house our homeless community. And by doing that, we need to listen to different groups, businesses, housing, and housing the homeless. My opponent actually voted against it, claiming that we already had a homeless shelter in the city of Kankakee. That shelter actually decided to close its doors a month later after that vote, leaving the homeless without a place other than the rotating place of Fortitude. So again, we need to do something. And the city of Kankakee is the only city with an ordinance in our county to house the homeless, and that's what we need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Osinga?
Thank you. I am not immune to homeless situations. I had a family member that was homeless for over 2 years, and I worked to help him get back on his feet. He was homeless for 2 years and lived in his car, so I know a little bit about homeless. We have 2 shelters in Kankakee. We have Fortitude, and we have Gift of God homeless shelter on North 5th Avenue. That shelter is still open. It's been open since 2008. They're similar facilities. They offer food, shelter, laundry facilities, and they also showers, and men, women, and children can stay at both shelters. We have to work together. The shelters need to work together. It seems like when you talk to people, they're competing against each other instead of working together. And I agree with what Mr. Hasek said here. This is an area-wide problem. This is not a Kankakee. This problem just doesn't have to be a Kankakee problem. Everybody should be involved in this. And city did make a $20,000 donation. Our CDA department did make a $20,000 donation to Fortitude.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, you have the question to Mr. Hassett.
Recently, I interviewed one of the candidates for mayor, Mr. Curtis, and we spoke about the Kankakee County Community Crisis Response Team, which is a group that is built around issues by the NAACP, mind you, to respond to crisis situations such as a police shooting or some other social or civic unrest. Should you be elected alderman, will you support Curtis or Armstrong in supporting that organization?
I believe absolutely. There is no doubt we should be supporting that crisis institution. So I would absolutely work with Mayor Curtis or Mayor Wells Armstrong if she's reelected.
Mr. Clark?
I agree. I would work wholeheartedly with either person running for mayor here in the city of Kankakee, and I'd also work closely with Mr. Pace and the NAACP. They've done a great job creating that crisis response team because he understands that this is a hot button issue and wants to get ahead of it before something happens here in the county or the city, and to be able to quell any unrest that we might have in a situation like that.
Thank you. Mr. Osinga?
Thank you. I would definitely be in favor of a crisis intervention unit. I haven't been involved as a police officer in a lot of life-threatening situations where families are traumatized. The more people that we could put forth to help people in need and keep calm in our community when you have tragic situations, the better. We need all the help we can get, and yes, I would support a unit like such as that.
Ms. Tutt?
Agreed. I too would support a unit such as that, and I do have experience as a former member of the SCAT team, the School Crisis Assistance Team, where we went out to schools within the Kankakee and Iroquois County area when there were crisis events that happened. I wholeheartedly support it. Mr. Pace for establishing the team.
Thank you. Mr. Provost, you have the question and questions to Mr. Clark.
Okay. With the influx of the just announced federal tax dollars to all the communities, including Kankakee, would you push for the removal of the city's vehicle sticker tax?
I absolutely would push for the removal of the city's vehicle sticker tax. We're getting $14.5 million. Now, the city has gone out to bond for $1.4 million. A part of their bonding is for infrastructure. I'd like to also put $5.6 million into infrastructure, giving $1 million to each ward. And that's on top of the about $30,000 to $60,000 that each ward gets a year from the motor fuel tax. That would be one of the priorities. Then from there, we need to decrease our property taxes and licensing. So business, liquor license, and the vehicle tax, that's about $2 million of the city's budget. We need to eliminate that for the year to allow people to get back on their feet. And then we need to use the $6.9 million that's left to decrease the city's property taxes for a year. This will allow businesses to keep their employees and hire more employees, and then allow residents to get back on their feet. But most importantly, we need to show the city where that money is going.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Mr. Osinga?
Thank you. First thing I would want to know as a community leader is how we can spend the money. We've been told we're getting $14 million. We're getting $7 million sometime this year and $7 million sometime next year. First thing I would want to do is have some community meetings. This is money that we didn't know we were going to get. This is kind of like winning the lottery, I guess. I would have some community meetings and say, what would you as community people would like to see done with some of this money? I would also have sit-downs with all the aldermen. We've had situations over the years where there was a wish list put together for the bonding money, and the aldermen weren't involved in any of that thought process, and I don't think that's right. We have to be smart with this money, we have to use it wisely, and we have to have all the community involved to have their input so they have some say-so in how this money gets spent. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tutt? Ms. Tutt?
And I agree with the three panelists here. We need to put some of this money back into the taxpayers' hands, give some relief from the potential, the possibly eliminating the city sticker. If we could do something to reduce some of the property taxes additionally. Certainly we need to find out how and where we can appropriate this money and how it can be spent, and through community activity and involvement where it could be placed the best to benefit everyone within the city limit.
Mr. Hassett?
Not to completely echo everything that was just said, having to go last, but we definitely need to know how we spend it first, or how we're able to spend it. Definitely community forums, communities need to be involved, whether you divvy up the money per the 7 wards and allocate those and have community meetings within your ward, and then as alderman, you bring that back to the city council in addition to the budget. committee meetings. We currently have a pension crisis. Like, it's one of the worst. So if we can allocate some of that money to pensions and infrastructure, that would also be some massive assistance.
Thank you. Ms. Morales, to Mr. Osing, a question.
Yes, this month is Women's History Month. Which woman in history do you admire and why?
Who do I admire? I'm sorry, I didn't catch all that.
Sure. March is Women's History Month. Which woman in history do you admire and why?
Boy, that's a tough question.
That's why we have Women's History Month.
To be on the safe side, I would say my wife. No, seriously, all kidding aside. You know, I was a police officer for 30 years, and my wife stuck through me through all that, and it was tough. I saw a lot, I did a lot, I was shot in the line of duty, I was injured more than once. I spent 2 or 3 stays in the hospital from injuries, and my wife stuck by me through all of that. And she is the rock of my life. Thank you.
Ms. Ted.
It's a long list. Coming to mind right now, Maya Angelou, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, my mother who was orphaned at a very young age and became successful, married my dad, raised all of us, provided a wonderful home for us. And another woman that was my partner of 23 years, who worked in social services in the Kankakee area, had been an advocate for every minority, every group, and was the founder of the crisis assistance team I spoke about a few moments ago.
Mr. Hassett.
Well, I was absolutely going to go with my fiance, and then I was going to go with my mother. So, in reality, it's got to be my mother. She worked 30 years at Carlos Restaurant to be able to have the time to pick us up from school, bring us to school, bring us to activities. She worked her butt off her whole life, and now she's at the post office. I don't know, I'm sure you've seen her on the west side. She's all of about 90 pounds, lugging around that mail bag every single day, snow, rain, whatever. She is absolutely one of my heroes, and I thank her for everything she's done for me, and definitely she's one of the people who made me into the man I am today.
Mr. Clark.
I think if I don't recognize my mom and my girlfriend here, I would be in trouble because they have to deal with me on a consistent basis. So definitely them just for the fact of dealing with me. But if we're going to look at all of history, I would like to look at Harriet Tubman. The things that she did, risking her life, there was a $50,000 bounty on her head, and she still continued to do what she did, taking slaves and bringing them to freedom. Doing that takes an enormous amount of courage to continue to do it and risking your life day in and day out. So I guess I'd have to give it to Harriet Tubman along with my mom and girlfriend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, you have the question. We're going to start with Ms. Tutt.
What would you do to improve the police and community relations in the city of Kankakee as a whole?
I would like to see more participation. If we could bring officers back to some of our community, our ward meetings, have some more officers actually out on the street. Some years ago, we had some in the summer months out on bicycles, and it opened a different way of communication versus just seeing someone in the car all the time. I would like to invite police officers when they're off duty to join our ward meetings, have some more police officers come and attend city council meetings and get their feedback. And I would love to listen to the police officers and what are some of their ideas? How do they feel that they can help within the community in bringing us all together?
Mr. Hassett.
We definitely need to get the police officers in the schools. I know with the House Bill 163, I believe they took the school resource officers out, but we have to have police officers interacting consistently with our youth, especially if our youth seems to be the problem within the city of Kankakee. We need to make sure those officers are in the school regularly, attending sporting events, doing anything possible to reach out to the younger community and let them know that they're present and they're there to work with them, not against them. So we definitely need to get the police back in the schools and involved in school-type activities. And we absolutely need to, number one, we need to have fourth ward meetings. I don't think there are fourth ward meetings currently. We just kind of attend the third ward meetings that Alderman Elsinga and Alderman Crawford put on. But we definitely need to have fourth ward meetings, and they definitely need to be involved in those.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
I agree that we need to have the police involved in our community meetings. I know in the first ward that Chief Cosman attends those personally, and I believe that having him attend the ones in the third ward would be absolutely great. Unfortunately, we have yet to we haven't had a meeting in the last 18 months in the third ward, which is a problem. So we can't build that trust if they aren't there. And again, we need to have our police getting out and meeting with residents, getting out of the car, walking, people being outside in their yards, talking with them, gaining that trust. That's the biggest problem we currently have right now between the police department and the community, is trust.
Thank you. Mr. Elsinga?
We began a program in the police department known as the Citizens Police Academy. That program was a 10-week program where people met for 2 hours a week for 10 weeks. And it talked about everything in the police department, the patrol division, detective bureau, the SWAT team, the KMAG team. We toured the county jail. We toured the dispatch center. And it was quite an eye-opening experience for all our people. And when I left the police department 10 years ago, we had approximately 300 people that attended that academy. And one big part of that academy, that program was, before you graduated, you had to get in the car and do a ride-along for 4 hours with a policeman. And it was such an eye-opening experience for so many people. They did not know what police dealt with every day. I had a gentleman that was very critical of the police department. And when he did his ride-along, he came back and he said, I have a whole new respect for policemen. The Citizens Police Academy, and we have a Hispanic Police Academy. And I've also encouraged our aldermen, our current aldermen that have never attended one, to attend the Citizens Police Academy, and maybe they would have a little more respect for the police officers that are out there every day protecting all of us. Thank you.
Anyone else have approximately 10 additional seconds to convey Mr. Taylor's question? And Mr. Provost, you have the next question, and it's to Mr. Hassett.
Okay. Do you believe Kankakee requires greater code enforcement or less code enforcement, and why?
This has been a hot topic issue for me. It's something that made me originally run for alderman. I noticed a little bit of the fourth ward start to go in decline and things weren't being addressed. So I believe we need to have greater code enforcement. But with that, we need to have code enforcement officers that are willing to go up and talk to citizens and first let them know, hey, you may have just moved into the area. This is not allowed in the city of Kankakee. We'd like to see you resolve it in the next 24 to 48 hours. If not, we have to follow this process. So I believe there needs to be better communication from the specific code officer to the potential residents that are an issue. I go throughout the city regularly, so I get to see all the good and the bad with what code enforcement does and doesn't. But in reality, the code officer is probably one of the toughest positions to be in the city because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. But my opinion is you should err on the side of just doing your job and make sure that the city's codes and ordinances are enforced.
Thank you. Mr. Clark?
I agree that we need to enforce our codes that are currently on the books, but we also, as aldermen, need to work with our code department. Again, bringing them into our community meetings and speaking with residents so that they understand what code is looking for and what not to do and not to do. But then also, we as aldermen need to take pride in our wards and work with our constituents to have monthly cleanups. It doesn't take much to grab a trash bag and pick up the trash on your block. That could be easy. And if you have 100 people doing that, you can cover the ward quickly and have a nice looking ward. And then when code isn't doing what they're supposed to do, we need to hold them accountable. Like any other employee, if they aren't doing what they need to do, we need to hold them accountable.
Mr. Osinga?
Thank you. Currently, we have 3 code enforcement officers plus a supervisor. At one time, I believe they had 5 or 6 code officers, so they're down quite a bit. For some reason, there was a decision made by this administration to do away with the state certification. So instead of having more qualified code officers, we have less qualified code officers. And their response when there was a discussion about this, well, we'll send them away to school and they'll have on-the-job training better, and it'll work out better that way. Code officers need to get out of the car and knock on the door. Currently, if they see an issue, they go back to their office, they type up a letter, they send it to the person, be it grass or whatever the issue is, and they tell them you have 7 days to rectify this problem. That's wrong. You need to get out, knock on the door, and say, mow your grass or we're going to give you a ticket. I had a couple issues last summer in my ward. Yards need to be mowed. I left a business card, said, please mow your grass. The next day, both those yards were mowed. We need to get out of the car and start doing more with the citizens.
Thank you. Ms. Tutt?
Yes, I agree that we need to be expanding some of the code officers' tasks, duties, and responsibilities. Also, we need to possibly bring in additional officers since the census is down for that. We need to be enforcing the ordinances that are on the books. We need to. There was a time when I was a City of Kankakee code officer. At that time, I worked with the Landlords Association, which is something I'd like to also see come back into fruition within the city limits. It was a way of discussing with the landlords about some of the property problems that continually reoccurred and have them direct to their tenants where they needed to abide by those rules and regulations.
Ms. Perales, you have the next question, and the question is to Mr. Clark.
Yes. What do you see as a weakness in the city of Kankakee?
The current weakness that is in the city of Kankakee that is holding it back right now is partisanship. We have aldermen that are playing political stunts with public safety. We have aldermen that are blocking stuff just for the sake of blocking it. That's why I'm running as an independent. I don't care which political party gets the credit. I care that the city of Kankakee is what is that it gets better. If the city of Kankakee benefits from this, it needs to happen. If we're going to get $66,000 in free equipment for our ambulances that is needed, we need to take care of that. We don't need to block that. We don't need to raise a stink about it. We needed a new fire truck. I talked with the chief. That fire truck was a 2005 with 14,000 hours and 140,000 miles on it. And the backup is older than I am. It needed to be replaced. We spent $31,000 more for a political stunt.
Thank you. Mr. Osinga?
Could you repeat the question, please?
The question is, what do you believe is one of the weaknesses in the city of Kankakee?
I'm sorry, I still didn't hear you. I'm sorry. I don't hear that well.
I will take off my mask. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. What do you believe is one of the weaknesses in the city of Kankakee?
Well, having been here for 12 years, I've seen a major difference in the last 4 years. When we used to come to city council, you never knew who was Republican, Democrat. It was never African American against whites. It was none of that. We all worked together, consistent unit. Mr. Clark is talking about buying a fire truck and costing more money. It did cost more money. But our ordinance says if you're going to buy anything over $20,000, or if you have a contract over $20,000, you have to go out for bids. You have to go out for bids. You can't just walk in, and it's not fair to the taxpayers of this city. Somebody walk in and say, I want to buy this fire truck for $570,000 with no bids. It has to be bid. That's what the law says. And all we did as aldermen, those of us, 8 aldermen voted against it, said, we just need to have the bids. Now, had the bids been done 6 months ago, would we have got it for that original price? Possibly. We don't know. But you have to follow the rules. That's how, people don't follow the rules that are on the books. That's how people get in trouble.
The ordinance also says that you can use 2/3 majority to purchase it. The fire chief went out for bid and got proposals through the co-op, and you said that you needed to talk to him and you did not reach out to him.
Thank you. Ms. Tuck.
Weaknesses within the city. Financial. We need to bring more jobs, better paying jobs, higher skilled jobs into the area. We need to support our police, our fire. We need to be more partisan within our city council structure. We need to include everyone when we're talking about the city.
Thank you. Mr. Hassett.
The weaknesses are definitely high taxes. I know Alderman Curtis championed to get the taxes a little lower, but we still have extremely high school district taxes. I believe there is some mismanagement of funds. That's why I said I'm going to look over every single bill as an alderman. There is a disconnect in the city council. I guess what hurt me is when Mr. Prude, Alderman Prude, said one night that on day one, on his swearing in, no one came up to introduce themselves or shake his hand or whatever. If that happened, that's a shame. I'm going to make it an absolute point to reach out to every single alderman if I'm elected. The blighted areas seem to be growing, so we definitely need to get that under control. That kind of coincides back and forth with code and enforcing codes. And rental versus homeownership. It seems like we're gaining a lot more rentals every single year, whether they're on the books or off the books. We need to work more towards educating people to buy homes.
Thank you. We want to thank our candidate, Mr. Alderman Osinga, Ms. Tuck, Mr. Hassett, and Mr. Clark for taking your time out, and we wish you luck on Tuesday, April 6th. We want to thank our panelists. And again, we'd like to thank Mr. Bertrand and the Kankakee Public Library. We're going to have the 3-minute opening statement starting with you, Ms. Tutt, followed by closing statement, or with Ms. Tutt, Mr. Osinga, followed by Mr. Clark and Mr. Hassett. You each have 3 minutes.
In conclusion, I would like to reiterate the platform points that are important to me as a leader, as an alderman in Kankakee that I will work to. And that's developing business opportunities citywide for all ethnicities. Creating safer streets and overall public safety, I'll work to give our law enforcement the tools and resources they need to protect our community and invite the police force to be more involved in our local communities. Ensuring that the taxes and ethnicity and responsibility that they benefit the entire community. I will continue to support the inclusion of the disabled and elderly around the city, our seniors, and I will foster better relationships between the minority communities and the city government to advocate for issues that are important for the future of all. I'll work towards ensuring all city services are accessible to all communities and backgrounds, and I will advocate for the homeless and underserved by supporting and enhancing community programs that provide life-saving support and resources. I'd like to thank the NAACP for hosting this event, and I would ask you to vote for me on April 6th or as early as tomorrow, since early voting has already started. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Osinga.
Thank you. It's been my honor to serve as the 3rd Ward Alderman for the past 12 years. I have lived in the 3rd Ward for the past 42 years. I am confident that I can continue to make good, sound decisions and provide leadership for the citizens in our ward. Being an elected official, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions that not everyone will agree with. Sometimes in making difficult decisions, you have to look at the big picture and decide what is best for our community as a whole. That has always been my approach to solving problems in our community, and I will continue that thought process. I am not a big social media guy like some of the younger people in the world. I strongly believe in face-to-face contact with our neighbors, and I prefer a phone conversation over a text message anytime. I drive around our neighborhood at least once a week to see if there are any issues that needed to be addressed. I would like to ask and encourage everyone to come out and vote on April 6th. And I would also ask for your vote so I continue to represent the 3rd Ward as your alderman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Thank you again to the Kankakee County branch of the NAACP and the Kankakee Public Library for hosting this event. Thank you again to our panel for asking great questions. Also, thank you for all of you here in attendance and viewing from home. This is how you become an informed voter. John F. Kennedy once said, "One person can make a difference, and everyone should try." I want to make a difference in our community. I moved to Kankakee because I work in the city and saw the potential that Kankakee had. As you have seen tonight, Kankakee has the potential to become the city of the future. Now it needs people that are willing to do the things possible to bring Kankakee into the future. As an alderman, I would work with everyone to make sure that what is best for the city is being done. Now is the time to vote. Early voting has started and will happen now through April 5th from 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Monday through Friday at the county building. Will also be voting on Saturday, March 27th and Saturday, April 3rd from 8:30 to noon. And finally, April 6th, Election Day from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Make your voice heard.
Thank you. Mr. Hassett.
Once again, I'd like to thank the NAACP for allowing me to be a part of this forum. I hope after tonight the choice is clear in the 4th Ward that I'm here to work for you, and I'm the most qualified individual to be elected to this most prestigious position within our city. I spent roughly the last 30 to 45 minutes telling you about myself and why I should be the next 4th Ward Alderman with the ideas I've shared. I've also spent the last several years preparing myself for this specific position so I can walk in confidently on day one. But for my closing, I'd like to focus on thanking the individuals who got me here to this point. First are my parents. My parents are the hardest working, most blue-collar people I know of, and it's people like them that make this city thrive. They are people of honesty, integrity, and a work ethic that's unmatched by many. They pass all these phenomenal qualities down to me, and I hope to continue to make them proud every single day. I can talk for hours on how they both impacted my life for the positive, but I only have 3 minutes. Also, I'd like to congratulate my father on his retirement after 43 years of hard labor at the end of this month. You deserve it, and I hope to be able to golf with you on a more regular basis. Second, to my fiancée, Kennedy. Even though she wants nothing to do with politics, she had supported my goal of becoming an alderman since day one. She has walked with me, and she has given me guidance on a different perspective. And she is my energy when I absolutely need a boost. I'd also like to thank my friends, the board members, and firefighters of the Kankakee Township Fire District for giving me the time and support I need to make this run for alderman a successful one. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention current 4th Ward Alderman Jim Fafford. Alderman Fafford has served since 2009, and I hope to take what progress he has made and expand upon it. I appreciate his support and guidance through this process. And last but not least, my hundreds of supporters in the 4th Ward, I hope to continue to provide you with leadership, compassion, a hard work ethic, answers, and total commitment to serving you over the next 4 years, regardless of political party. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, we'd like to thank our candidates, the panelists, and our timer, Ms. Crank, and the Political Action Committee of the Kankakee Branch NAACP, Mr. Bertrand, and his staff at the Kankakee Public Library. Again, early voting has started, and also Tuesday, April 6th, vote for the candidate of your choice. Thank you, and have a good evening. We will start the mayoral forum promptly around 6:45.
Thank you.